Am I right in thinking as well that, and I read this in an email that was sent around, that you have become the fastest growing health app in history?
Yes. The stats of our lead investor clearly indicate that, nobody in the health and fitness sector has ever reached the levels of our growth before.
Welcome to the Startup Microdose podcast. We are joined today by Oleg Fomenko, founder of Sweatcoin. Big day for you today. I saw that the number of steps on your platform just tipped 800 billion steps, which is massive. I'd probably pay more attention to it than you do, actually.
Thank you.
But I did some calculations, and a nice fact for you is that is almost the distance between the Earth and Jupiter, the number of steps that you guys have recorded now, which is enormous.
I'd like to say that I've contributed 1.2 million of those steps.
Yeah, I've contributed 3, but I seem to be being gifted a lot of free Sweatcoin, which we'll be talking about later.
Thank you, guys.
But yeah, before we get into that, we'd love to go into your background, because you've had a really interesting background. You've been a long-standing friend of AIN and Zav's, who I gather you met at a wedding once upon a yonder. He regales fond stories of singing something and dancing a lot.
I have no recollection of that.
But so, just to start with, because I guess you didn't grow up in the UK, you grew up in Russia.
Yeah.
And how long were you there for, and what did your education in that look like?
So before we launch into that, can I just sort of insert one small correction? So this is actually 1/3 of co-founding team of Sweatcoin.
Yep.
So it's myself, Oleg Fomenko, and then I have 2 other co-founders, Anton and Igor Khmelov. So, because I was probably the first person for you guys that started speaking of Sweatcoin, you feel like I'm the founder, but there is actually a whole team right now approaching 25 people. So we've been growing rather rapidly, but this is just to make sure that the audience also knows that, it's actually a massive team effort, and it's not one guy that can get us.
Am I right in thinking as well that, and I read this in an email that was sent around, that you have become the fastest growing health app in history?
Yes. The stats of our lead investor clearly indicate that, nobody in the health and fitness sector has ever reached the levels of our growth before.
So it's really impressive, and I think the audience will find out it's really impressive when they realise it's something that came about on the back of a business that was already ticking along pretty well. I mean, to get 1 million users for Bloom before was a hell of an achievement as well. So with all of that stage set, and people hopefully going to find out more, so your journey from growing up in Russia, was that back in the days of the sort of USSR, as it were?
Yeah, no, absolutely. I was born in the USSR in the family of military engineers. They were not military per kind of because they wanted to be, but because actually the best engineering talent was always hired at the times of Cold War into military applications. So my mother was an engineer in what was called survival complexes, which is kind of anything that basically shoots stuff out of the sky, because apparently that's how you survive in the fight. Kind of a bit of trivia for you. And my father was a test pilot on choppers. And so I grew up surrounded by kind of math, physics, and people talking a lot about flying. And most of my schoolmates went into either physics, math, or development, coding, software development. And I was supposed to be doing the same, but when I was finishing my education, Soviet Union started crumbling, and I saw what's happening with the engineers when the whole country is falling apart. And I've decided that I wanted to take lower risk approach and focused on languages, and graduated from the university with diploma in psychology and sociology of management.
Wow, I didn't realize that.
And then I went and started working in marketing for Western companies, because marketing and sales were the only functions that they had in the Soviet Union or Russia back then. They were literally just sending product in, and they were selling it, and you could either market it or you could sell it. And that's what I started doing. And at the first possible opportunity, I've departed from Russia and went and lived in Austria for 5 years, working for Coca-Cola. And after that, I moved over to London. So this has been already since I've been here since 2000. And I joined Boston Consulting Group and done a few years with them, and then realized that I actually was a lot more entrepreneurial than I thought. The funny thing about me in entrepreneurship is that when I was growing up in Russia, the word entrepreneur would be synonymous with someone that will end up in jail sooner or later, and definitely going to jail wasn't part of my plan. So kind of entrepreneurship wasn't really something that I kind of kept in my sights. And this is something that only emerged when I came over to the UK, and I realized how structured and very much kind of focused on certain kind of how do we call it, templated successes we are. And I started thinking that there are so many wonderful things that we could possibly do with our time and with our energy. And kind of I started toying with it, but without having British citizenship, I found it was very, very difficult to actually start the business and, for example, open an account for a business was very complicated when you don't have British passport. So I had to kind of put a delay on that plan and get my British nationality, which I got in 2008. And virtually, within a few months, I started my kind of first business, which was BloomFM music streaming service.
Did that start in 2008?
Yeah.
Wow. Yeah, because I mean, I remember
founded it. It's not like it started, but I founded it in 2008, and it took a long time to raise funding to get us going, because legal music still remains a kind of an amazing challenge. Despite Spotify announcing their IPO, they, kind of spectacular and profitable.
It's happening soon, the IPO, isn't it?
Yeah.
Yeah, it'd be really interesting to see what happens, because clearly they're the dominant force in terms of streaming music. I don't know many people who haven't got a Spotify Premium.
Yeah.
But as you say, their ability to take that to monetization is pretty difficult.
Yeah, no, it's kind of the biggest issue, and if you look through their prospectus, still remains that more than 70% of all of their gross takings go to music industry. Imagine that you run Google, where 70% of all revenues that come in go to someone else.
And something we always, Zav and I always pick up on when we look at a pitch deck, is the revenue your own, or are you getting a set small percentage of it? And a lot of people push in the gross revenue and say, we're turning £1 million turnover a year, and then you look in more detail and you find out they're only making 100 grand.
Yeah.
And actually they never will make more than that 100 grand unless they can squeeze some more margins by virtue of size. But it's quite easy for them to then erode that play by somebody else coming in who's willing to offer them a cheaper commission rate, and then you start having leakage. So it's super difficult. Because you did do a hell of a job with Bloom. You got to 1 million users. I seem to recall
1.3 million users, and only in the UK. Yeah, no, it was going. Now, with the benefit of hindsight, I would say that kind of I am lucky that what happened and Bloom perished, because now we have Sweatcoin, and kind of it's a lot more interesting, and I think potentiality of Sweatcoin is almost unlimited, while with Bloom, this whole kind of challenge of royalties and how do you ever make this profitable has always been looming on the horizon. But we got to 1.3 million users on the back of a very, very kind of simple proposition that you could actually subscribe to music legally on your mobile for £1 a month as opposed to £10 a month.
It was quite interesting, because I guess the model there was a matter of addressing efficiencies and a bit more control over your usage, so it was a bit more dynamic.
It was segmentation, really. I mean, if you think about it, especially in early days of a lot of products, what you end up having is you need to segment things, and you need to offer kind of entry-level product And typically you end up having 3 tiers. I mean, think of broadband. It's only now that we have arrived, it's binary. You either have a broadband or you don't have a broadband. But for a very, very long time, there were tiers, and you could pay very little, and then you had little usage, and then you would go and level up, or you had all you can eat. The funny thing that with music, this still is not happening, and 120 quid a year does remain quite a lot of money for a lot of people to spend, especially if you're a student. So that's exactly the kind of the demographic and the use case that we went after. Because if you remember 2008, it's rampant piracy. People are concerned about kind of doing the right thing, but when they're confronted with 10 quid a month, most of them balk. And kind of we said, here is a tiered product. You can start as little as £1 a month, and that almost kind of became it's a no-brainer. I have to use.
Yeah, it's like it's less than a coffee.
So that started really rolling, and kind of we had a phenomenal success, especially when we talk about young people and students. And but it's very, very expensive to run a bigger music service.
Did it create a meaningful gateway of upsell? Was it a case of actually a lot of people ended up going up to a higher, more premium package, and actually all they needed was to just take that first step into the £1 a month, and then they'd naturally get used to paying, and then once you are comfortable paying for music, they then upgrade? Or was it actually most people did just want a £1 a month?
We didn't have long enough history. If you look through kind of Spotify's even published numbers, it does take a long time and shed loads of A/B testing and optimizations and kind of product work to really fine-tune your upsell funnel. Mm-hmm. So, of course, we had the highest number on £1. And I don't remember the exact kind of funnel dimensions, how it was going, but I can tell you that we had quite a lot of people who were on mid-tier and on top tier. And our top tier was also, you could pay £13 on the mobile, because Apple charges 30%. And we had people who preferred that because, Spotify then and still now remains that it's impossible to subscribe on your mobile. So quite a lot of people preferred that top tier because they could just pay out of the kind of phone as opposed to go on the web and pay there.
And did you find that a fun experience? Was it fun sort of locking horns with the music industry in terms of the lifestyle around it, or was it more just a sort of tech endeavour? Did you get to live any of the kind of rubbing shoulders with the music industry lifestyle, or was it?
Yeah, I wouldn't. Was it fun? Yes, a lot of times. Was it fun to negotiate with the music industry? Not at all. This would be the last thing that I would ever recommend to anyone to undertake.
But this is what Anthony Rose said. We had Anthony Rose on from Seed Legals, and in a previous existence, he'd
Kazaa.
It was Kazaa, yeah. And his experience of music executives was them trying to sue him for was it $1 billion?
$1 billion.
Yeah. No, thankfully we avoided that, but I can tell you that it was just endless. And we are sitting here in kind of central London, and I spend countless times in the building next door with companies, because all of the labels are here. Warner, Sony is right here, Universal is just further down the road, and the number of meetings that we had to go through and number of conversations we had to have in order to secure deals has just been absolutely phenomenal. And it was multiple years that it took in order to secure a 30+ million tracks catalog. So it's a very, very, very high cost of entry.
Yeah, which is it's so difficult for startups operating at anything that makes it drag out contract lengths and stuff like that.
That's why you don't see an awful lot of kind of massive innovation. There are a lot of people, and I've been approached for years after Bloom by people who wanted to do something in music, and you really need to raise quite a lot of money to sustain yourself, to build a product, and sustain you through this negotiation cycle. Or you do what Kazaa did, and plenty of others that kind of try to go through user-generated content or kind of acquire content illegally, and then try to kind of whiten themselves out through negotiations. But that is also a very, very tricky process, as evidenced by the fact that the two big players are still Apple and Spotify that didn't go down that path.
Yeah, and I think also that they have the ability to innovate themselves. I've got a friend who works at Tidal, and their play is just ring fencing their own content and hoping you care enough about it to pay for it, I guess.
Difficult, kind of music business is, in my experience, it's, you need to have a complete catalog, so labels hold quite a lot of keys to your success. That's one. The product needs to be absolutely astonishing because, kind of right now, it probably is a lot more level playing field, but back then, legal products were so suboptimal in comparison to piracy. It was unbelievable because you could just play, get an app, rip YouTube, and it would be on your phone faster than, kind of going through any legal channel. And people were just saying, why do you want me to pay when it's actually good quality and free faster? And, it's a big, big, big challenge that we had to overcome.
I mean, you've mentioned a lot of obstacles that that you seem to have overcome quite well, but the actual reason why Bloom didn't work out was something that you'd probably say was totally unforeseen.
Yeah, no, it's, that's, if you're an entrepreneur, you know that there are this known unknowns, and, kind of you manage them, or you try to mitigate them, and you think about those risks. But to be honest, it's unknown unknowns that are the scariest, and that was specifically that sort of unknown unknown. There were sanctions, there was a kind of complete shift in the relationship between our countries, and my funding was from Russia. And, all of a sudden it became improbable for my investor to continue funding the business in the UK, and they basically put it on ice. And they had to fire 30 people literally on the spot because I was a director of the business, and there is such thing as trading insolvent in the UK, which basically precludes you from kind of trying to salvage the business when you know full well that you don't have enough money to pay salaries. So in the US, for example, some businesses try to go through it because they don't have the same kind of rule or the same law. Here, it's very, very difficult to try to salvage the unknown like that.
And given the work you put in and all the success that you've had with it, I imagine that must have been, actually I can't imagine how hard that must have been for it to end up that way. But I guess it's from there that the story leads to Sweatcoin. And was Sweatcoin the sort of the pleasant thing that pulled you out of? I mean, did you go into a gloom in the post-Bloom era?
You should ask my wife. Ed.
Maria, she's
my wife.
Fantastic.
I can be all macho here, but it was pretty difficult. First of all, it's from 100 miles per hour to zero in a very, very short period of time. That takes some adjustment to do. Then you firing people, and then you're realizing that you actually would need, as a director, to spend months, and it turned out to be 2 years, burying the child that you were raising for quite a long time, because it's your fiducial duty to make sure that you kind of sort everything out. And then you are dealing with administrators and answering all those questions, and effectively trying to keep yourself out of a pickle, because in some circumstances directors might become financially responsible for the affairs of the company that's been closed. So it's not a very positive and happy place.
Does that build a hell of a lot of resilience that you've carried forward for you, or is it just a crappy experience, do you think?
You know, I think, to be honest, with the benefit of hindsight, you can say that yes, that builds resilience. But I think that everything in life kind of prepares you for things, and if someone thinks that they cannot handle something, just wait for that to happen and you'd be totally surprised. I think that everyone is perfectly capable of handling situations like that. They just didn't have a luck or unfortunate luck to be there. But, you know, you just carry on because, you know, what else can you do? You know, in my case, I had a young family and kind of had a business that I was a director of, and I had duty to the business and to my family to carry on. That just makes you, you know, I suppose, focused on making sure that your steps are very, very deliberate and effective. So, as you rightly said, Ollie, that led through kind of, as always, serendipity to a conversation with Anton, my co-founder.
How did you meet Anton?
I know Anton for longer than I care to admit. We met in my first ever job in Russia more than 20 years ago. And we kind of stayed loosely in touch, you know, kind of, we kind of remain acquaintances. And then he came over to the UK as well. I came and joined BCG. He came to study at LBS. We kind of also remained loosely in touch. But we rekindled our friendship in year, I think 2005 or 2006. I was pulling together a team of friends to climb Kilimanjaro with me. And I gathered a group of 12, and Anton was one of them. And when we got to the summit, my mum had a bit of a kind of health scare, pretty serious one actually. And it was me, my brother, and Anton that ended up getting her from the summit to the nearest hospital at the foot of the mountain in 4 hours. That was one of the fastest ever descents of Kilimanjaro, because we literally run. One person was carrying her, two others were kind of running either behind or in front, and then when one is exhausted, that one picks up. Then you kind of take a breather, you catch up with them, and you know, so on and so forth. So, you know, when somebody helps you to rescue your mum, that sort of brings you quite close, at least, you know, from my side. I was absolutely eternally grateful. And we remained in kind of very, very good sort of contact ever since. And we're kind of, when he was in London, we were meeting up, because by then he moved over to Moscow. And then he just kind of mentioned his idea, because he has experience in sport consulting, as well as sport apparel. So he was marketing director of Reebok in Russia for a number of years. And he's done a lot of sports consulting when he was with A.T. Kearney. So he was dreaming and thinking about something that would make people more kind of engaged with sport and more physically active. He was thinking of it as a loyalty scheme. And after the death of Bloom, I was very much into blockchain and Bitcoin, because ever since 2011, when I first encountered it, I was totally fascinated with technology and just the way of thinking about technology that Bitcoin introduced into my life. And while it didn't really fit what we did at Bloom, that was something that was sitting in the back of my mind. So when kind of Bloom perished, and I had to spend quite a bit of time kind of on wrapping things up, I started digging into blockchain and Bitcoin and kind of thinking what my next move is going to be. So when we met, Anton was talking kind of sport and fitness and health, and I was talking blockchain, and went for a run. I lived in Richmond back then, and you know, despite us climbing Kilimanjaro, and subsequently I climbed shitloads of other mountains, and I was fit as a fiddle. At that time in 2014, I could actually barely do 5K, and I'm not talking even at a decent pace. I'm talking about kind of just
doing it,
running 5K.
Why? Just because I saw you in that time, and you looked in good health.
No, absolutely, and I think that this is where you don't need to be extremely overweight or obese to kind of be unfit. I looked fit, but actually kind of running at okay pace, which was sort of case with Anton. I realized that I completely let myself go. Not that I couldn't move, but I definitely wasn't fit, and my breathing wasn't there, and my heart wasn't coping extremely well. So basically, on kilometer 3, I needed him to take a breather, and I thought, hang on a second, he's actually got a point that if I, after only probably 2 years of not spending sufficient amount of time kind of preparing for mountains, doing my expeditions, going to a gym, if I am in this state, then what about other people? And I thought that I had self kind of motivation and energy and drive and way of kind of staying fit, and I failed. So I really started thinking what was happening and why this is going on. And we very quickly, through our conversations, realized that there is a kind of universal problem that is applicable to 100% of people. And the problem is, nature doesn't want you to move. Nature didn't build you to move. Nature built you capable of moving, but nature wants you to preserve energy. Energy at the times when we were built, or when we were kind of designed, energy was extremely hard to come by. That would be like squandering money around when you're walking on the street. That is absolutely senseless. So you were getting a prey or kind of getting some food, you were eating it, and then you were preserving that energy at least until next opportunity to get that food when that mammoth appeared again, so that you had another stock of meat. You wouldn't run around, sort of jump from tree to tree and kind of...
Just for the sake of, yeah.
No, because that would mean that your tribe will probably die if you didn't get more food. So nature was so serious about kind of its focus on preserving this energy that it created this thing called present bias. That is kind of universal behavioral bug or feature, actually, that made us survive through these times of famine and kind of lack of or scarcity of energy. But now it becomes a bug because food comes in plates, massive plates, 3 times a day. We continue consuming it, but we are not expending this energy, and nature continues to push us into preserving energy. So we are ballooning, we are not moving, and obesity is the 3rd largest destroyer of value after cigarettes and wars. And unlike the first 2, actually the trend is worsening. So while we, as a humanity, we actually realize the dangers and the issues with cigarettes, and wars are clearly recognized as a problem, obesity and people being overweight continues to worsen. So when we realize that there is a universal behavioral bug, then we kind of thought, hang on a second, how can we tackle it? And nature paves the way, because other than this, there are other behaviors that are badly affected by present bias, and one of them is procreation. So nature had to figure out how to overcome its own behavioral feature called present bias, and it had to invent a thing called instant gratification.
Dopamine loops, yeah.
Now, nature went in a lot more kind of blunt way, and it created an orgasm. So orgasm is an instant gratification that ensures that procreation continues. And dopamine and what's the name?
Serotonin?
Oxytocin? No.
Only if you're hugging them, Ollie. Only if you hug afterwards.
Yeah,
that's what I do.
The name escapes me right now. It will come back. But basically, nature failed to create an orgasm for exercise. And in a way, this is
what endorphins? Is that what you're...
Yes, endorphins, exactly. Endorphins are very interesting because they're so subtle, and you actually need to be really clean in order to feel them. So if you're extremely unfit and, you know, if you're smoking or drinking or, you know, kind of live in an extremely polluted environment, when people start exercising, they think that this is going to make them feel good, but if you're really unfit, all you get for about 3 or 4 weeks is this feeling like, you know, am I the only one that, you know, kind of feels this miserable? You know, why is it in the movies they all smile after running and, you know, I just want to vomit? And, you know, endorphins are too subtle for most people. And, you know, kind of they wouldn't qualify as an orgasm for, you know, kind of, if we were getting endorphins for procreation, I think that probably would be superseded by cockroaches, you know, millennia ago. So that's basically what we started kind of figuring out. How can we create instant gratification for exercise? And kind of we quickly realized that marrying blockchain thinking with kind of this motivation idea, you know, would work extremely well. And that's how Sweatcoin was born.
It does, actually. It's amazing because I remember being introduced to it in 2015, I want to say. I think I was one of the really, really early onboarders. I remember thinking that your steps and your movement just go to waste. If you walk around, they just turn in. It doesn't. Nobody's counting them. Nobody cares that you walked 10,000 steps. It means nothing unless it does. Yeah. And as soon as you started being able to count them, and my loop in my brain was just, I'm taking my phone with me everywhere I go anyway. So if my phone's passively counting steps, I'd literally, the equation says there is nothing to lose by having Sweatcoin, because even if I did nothing with it for 10 years, and then suddenly it was redeemable for 2 free drinks, it's still better for the sake of, you know, how much is charging your phone cost? Nothing.
Yeah.
I remember just thinking it was so elemental, because a step is just such a basic unit of human movement that once you start controlling that and incentivizing that, it's incredibly powerful.
And we sort of skirted around explaining exactly what it is for the people who don't know. So perhaps you could just give us the 2-line explanation.
So Sweatcoin is a digital currency. We count steps, we verify them. There is a fairly draconian verification algorithm that filters out anything that is not 100% guaranteed to be a genuine step. And then we convert 1,000 verified steps to 1 coin. So effectively every step that you take is converting into a financial reward. So with Sweatcoins that you earn, you can spend them with our vendor partners, and we have more than 300, probably by 400 companies now that we work with that accept Sweatcoins for their goods, services, or experiences, gift cards, etc. So, you know, in effect, what we do is, as Ed so eloquently sort of said, something that you do every day, we start converting it to a valuable asset. And while the initial feeling is, wow, you know, kind of just, you know, something that I do, this doesn't cost me much, why don't I do it? The reality is that once you start incentivizing and you have an idea in your mind, you actually walk more. So one of the kind of most powerful things that I'm really excited about is that we now have really robust set of statistics that shows that our users walk between 10 and 20% more per day. And one of the most exciting things that I'm really, really kind of thrilled by, and this is a stat that we received only so in the last couple of weeks, we're working with the University of Warwick that has done a fairly big study for us. Or not for us, with us actually. And we now have statistics that shows that we make people who are overweight or obese more active than we make kind of an average weight person. So we are actually influencing people that probably needed kind of this motivation, this help, more than anyone else. So rather than making athletes that already run in the morning run more, which, you know, can but in terms of societal impact, in terms of impact on that obesity problem that I mentioned before, we're actually absolutely fair and square in the middle of it, and we're really, really, really making a dent in what we were hoping would be the impact of our business. Because our proclaimed goal is to make the world move more. So it's not to convert, I don't know, trillions of steps or to have hundreds of millions of users. I would feel that we're doing something meaningful if we are making people more active on a daily basis, because that creates an immense amount of economic value for everybody.
It's interesting because you raise the global baseline, and actually, if you're starting with the lowest common denominator, which it sounds like from the study that you are, actually probably the 10% at the bottom probably have a huge cost to the NHS in terms of treating them, because there's some really nasty health implications of not being more active. And I've noticed it makes me walk more. Sometimes I literally just see the bus and I just think, well, I'll just walk up the hill today. Why not?
When you're faced with that choice, suddenly you're empowered to make a decision that
has a consequence.
It's going to benefit you.
This is what we're seeing in in our user base, that in the morning, people rush to their offices. This is a standard commute, but especially in the afternoon, when the pressure of the day is off, that's when we see a considerable change in the amount of physical activity. So people skip the bus, as you just described, even though if you're in central London, actually walking is frequently getting you there faster than being on the bus. That's kind of my empirical observation. People go for longer runs, people go for longer walks with their dogs. We have groups of friends who basically determine who's going to be buying pints based on their position in the leaderboard. And it just creates all this interesting and very kind of novel dynamics that make me kind of really excited. And as I mentioned, if that leads to people being more active by 20% on a daily basis, that has an immense amount of impact on that obesity trend and on the cost base of NHS in the UK in the long run.
And what's the long-term vision? Does it go further than? I mean, it's already
enormous,
doing some pretty impressive things. But is there? Can you take it any further? Do you have designs on that?
No, absolutely. As far as I'm concerned, this is step one. So when we started the business, the biggest question was, is there a need for it at large scale? And will the currency have value? So there is a resound answer yes on the first question, because we already hit 11 million plus installs. And last week we had 4-point-something million users using us. Yesterday, probably 3.5. So we're redoing our statistics, but this is ballpark numbers that we have. And clearly, there is a huge amount of interest among consumers as well as vendors and companies to actually accept Sweatcoins and to provide good services to these audiences. So that kind of box very, very ticked. The second question is then, does this currency have value? Absolutely, because we already have Sweatcoin exchange.com that somebody organized. We already have a lot of trading activity happening on Reddit and in Discord. And this is with us being centralized. We're not even on blockchain, because when we originally sat down, we realized that we can build blockchain. It's going to take X amount of time, but it's not going to verify any hypothesis. It's a technology that can underpin the transactions. And we said, oh, we're going to start centralized because this is faster. This way, we're going to do an MVP in a lot less time, and we went for it. So now we still need to turn it into a proper recognized currency. In order for that to happen, we need to put it on a blockchain or some other mechanism that allows public scrutiny and making sure that it's highly visible, and we're not the only party that administers the whole thing. So that's huge next step for us, and I'm spending an increasing amount of time on this right now.
So do you mean by that? Do you mean it already exists as a barter ecosystem? Because I thought about that in that I was prepared to, if somebody would buy my bike for 1,000 Sweatcoin, I would probably sell it to them. So it kind of realised the value in my own head. But there's actually there was an offer on the Sweatcoin app for, I think, £1,000 of cash on PayPal for 20,000 Sweatcoins. So that kind of anchored a value. But I suspect actually it's even more valuable than that. But so you're going to try and build out the barter ecosystem, something more formalised?
This is another point that I haven't covered yet. But no, the first point is related to us really listing ourselves on exchanges. So that it's not that you need to spend your Sweatcoins on stuff that is available in the marketplace, be it companies that we work with or other individuals. It is literally like, kind of, if you have crypto, you go and you change it for other crypto units, or you change it into fiat currency. This is what we want to achieve. We want Sweatcoin to be traded on exchanges and have market decide the value of it, because kind of one of the most fascinating things that I don't know yet what it means, but I know that it's hugely significant, is if I talk to laymen about cryptocurrency, the biggest question that kind of people ask is, why does it have any value? It's just a sequence of numbers. How do you feel that with value? Why do people pay for it? Why does it grow or kind of decline in value? But it's this zero to anything that seems to be an intellectual challenge for a lot of people. Now, in our case, I never ever had a question from anybody asking, why does it have any value? Because if this Sweatcoin was generated by my steps, of course it has value. And it's intuitively so obvious that we cross this barrier from zero to whatever the number by definition. And that makes it into a very interesting currency, because there is never a conversation where does it have any value, but it's how much. And that is a perfect asset to put into the market and figure out what is it actually worth and who is going to be buying it. And we have really, really amazing kind of plans on kind of our future monetary policy and how the currency is going to be unraveling in the long run. Unfortunately, I cannot talk about details because they kind of are being built out and analyzed. But all I can say is that it makes me really, really excited to put us on blockchain, list us on exchanges, and kind of see where the world takes the value of one Sweatcoin.
You'll have to come back on in a couple of years and we can revisit that.
A lot sooner than that.
A lot sooner.
Yeah, no, we're not going to be waiting for 2 years.
Exciting.
So phase 2 is potentially much bigger.
A lot bigger. Because, kind of, first of all, we know that we can go global and we raised money, we can do that. Second, we know we can put it on blockchain and effectively become listed, and as a listed currency, which means that if you're a person on the street and you're taking step, it's not that every step generates some Sweatcoins and then I need to kind of go and select what I actually want to spend them on.
Yeah, some more Sweaty Betty leggings or something in Southeast India or something. Yeah,
you actually going to kind of it's a very, very simple and very powerful thing that every step that you take generates some financial reward that you will be able to convert in whatever currency you want and spend on anything that you want. And I know that that is going to have a big, profound effect on also the motivation of people to move, and that's going to result in people becoming a lot more active, and that opens a whole raft of conversations and applications that I am personally extremely excited about. Like, I believe that every country would need to accept part of their taxes in Sweatcoins, because that means that the person is really thinking about their body, their health, and they are actually minimizing the cost of healthcare, of I don't know, kind of increasing productivity for the UK PLC or for any other country where we'll be operating. So kind of these are the real kind of applications that make me kind of go, wow, this is where the real potential is. And what you mentioned about the marketplace and making sure that people can sell stuff for Sweatcoins, that is part of our roadmap, definitely. And this is going to be happening perhaps in parallel with the blockchain.
So that's anyone selling rather than just the vendors.
Yeah.
Right. A bit like a sort of Gumtree marketplace.
Yeah. We already have, kind of more than 50,000 people have volunteered stuff to sell. So we are receiving dozens, if not hundreds, of offers and products per day. We're just trying to figure out what is the way to really kind of put them in front of people. How do we curate it? Because you don't want to have anything illegal in there. You don't want to have anything, It just raises quite a lot of questions that we could not deal with when we were 10 people. So now we nearly doubled in size, and people are getting up to speed, so we can start tackling bigger things like this.
Yeah, it's very difficult. I think when Instagram opened up a shopping thing, people were using it to sell drugs, which is something you perhaps don't expect when you open a marketplace. Maybe you do, I don't know.
It's quite interesting. I guess you get an economy where you have net producers and net recipients, and I thought about this with Sweatcoin of there will be a health bill to foot for being unhealthy, and if you are a net producer of Sweatcoin, therefore seem to be a healthy, non-burdensome member of the economy, the idea that you could trade that if somebody then needs to go and draw on their health premium or something like that, and I can say you've just been hit with, particularly in America where the private healthcare sector, I know some people who've had have $60,000 to $100,000 worth of work, and you could then trade in Sweatcoin for them to see their hospital bills paid off in a not so egregious way. You can see how it's quite interesting in terms of it evening out the kind of peaks and troughs in society, of basically making sure there's a slightly more appropriate welfare system.
Yeah,
there'll be a Black Mirror episode where you can't get health insurance because you haven't got enough Sweatcoin.
Yeah, denied.
I deliberately haven't watched that one because I just don't want it to get into my head, because people were kind of saying, ooh, this leads into these places. If you let people or some information into your mind, it starts to shape things. Mm-hmm. I used to do a lot of paragliding, and you learn very quickly one thing. You fly wherever you look. So if there is a single tree in a landing field, it's astonishing how many people land on it because they look at it, trying to avoid it. But the motorics of the body and kind of everything is leading to exactly opposite. Right. So if there is an idea that you're trying to avoid, the last thing that you do is you kind of focus on it as a point that you're trying to avoid.
Focal dystopia, is that what they call it? When you basically focus on something and then it magnifies it. Is that something you've kind of got into your mind from years sort of spent studying psychology and sociology and stuff like that, in terms of, are you very aware of how you curate your own mind space when thinking about...
I landed on that tree.
You landed on that tree. That sounds excruciating.
And it hurt my ego and
your legs.
And I really thought about it. So I wish I could say that. No, I read it in books, and
some of the best lessons are learned that way, though, aren't they? It's like you don't do it twice.
The University of Hard Knocks.
I think what you seem to tap into that I really like is the same thing the plastic bag tariff tapped into, which is that these small changes but brought in to influence people, because I'm quite big into the idea that a lot of people are complaining about the cards we're dealt by central government, big decisions, but I think there's got to be a slight movement, especially with technology, to individualism, which is that there is an individual accountability en masse, that if you don't pick up a plastic bag any more than if 7 million people a day decide that 5p is too much and they don't want to pick up a plastic bag anymore, then 7 million plastic bags are not put into circulation. And I think the same basic principle, and I think the same basic principle goes for Sweatcoin, and I think the most interesting startups at the moment are kind of dealing with those first principles and addressing people and the small psychological hacks at a very basic level. I find it almost interesting that people kind of sort of even put you in the same category, or even bring up Black Mirror around you, because I think there's a really noble crusade here, actually, which is that you're really...
Everything can be turned into something negative, so I totally understand why they do it. I guess I just told the story to explain why I haven't watched it. It was a deliberate decision because, I just thought that this is not the type of info I would like to have. But it's good that you mentioned nudging, because we know now that kind of drastic changes in one's lifestyle are very, very hard to sustain, and very, very few people are able to do it, or they happen in an extremely kind of stressful and extremely challenging moments of one's life. When you can really change behavior. People quit smoking when they have a terrible diagnosis, or let's not go into some negatives. The point is that nudging is something that works, and it's a fairly kind of well established in psychology concept, but this is something that is starting to be used in so many ways. In the UK, for example, tax bill has gone up tremendously when David Cameron established the nudge unit, and the first task of nudge unit was to figure out how, through letters and usage of text, you can increase people's payment of tax on time, and they ended up achieving more than 200 million increase pounds per year in collection because of texts that they were using, and they were using this kind of tiny little behavioral change insights that they were literally putting into those same letters that were reminding people that it's about time to pay tax.
That's so interesting, actually. I think because when you look at the influence of social media at the moment, which is quite topical, and the idea that you're infiltrated by what you see on a daily basis, and that's another reason why I came off Facebook, is because I felt that it nudged me every single morning into a sort of thought spiral that I didn't necessarily want to begin on. Yeah. That it would be quite interesting if they actually took some pride or agency over the idea that, yeah, they should really be showing you what you want to discover in your friends, but they could use that influence to positively nudge you, into I guess, aggregate more positive behaviours. And I think that's something maybe they're not addressing at the moment, which I think they should or could be, and that may get the sort of monkey off their back, is that I think they sort of just bombarding us with news, and before you know it, you're kind of saturated, you don't remember any of it, and it'd be quite nice if...
the problem is their KPI is just eyes on their site, time on their site, and they've worked out that outrage, clicks is how they do that, and so they're not incentivized to hook people in a way that's going to have a beneficial effect on their life, like Sweatcoin and Headspace, and technology like that, which is using the same psychological hooks and triggers, but trying to promote the well-being of the individual. As you say, Facebook and Instagram haven't got that far. They've got to the addictive hook stage, but not to the promoting well-being of the individual.
Would you do that with Sweatcoin? Because one thing I like about Sweatcoin is it doesn't necessarily probe too much into me as an individual. It didn't ask me my body weight, my body type. It didn't come across as a fitness app in the sense that it's like, oh, who are you? You can look like this. It didn't create sort of an envy. It was just like your very personal journey to go and accumulate Sweatcoin. Only you're monitoring it, or your friends if you choose to follow them. Do you see a vehicle for incentivizing people more? Like if you sat there and you looked at all the data and go, people are super active, but they're not as active as maybe they could be at 6:30 p.m. There's loads of, we could probably get a few more people walking, or the government says, hey, could you help people walk? And you could go, earn 1.2 surge price Sweatcoin for walking at these peak times, or is that not something that you guys would ever go down?
The 1.2 will definitely not happen because, we're a currency, and one of the main things that, it needs to be very simple, very clear, very transparent rules as to how is currency generated. So if you pay different amounts of currency, depending on the time of the day, you're already sort of creating, it's a bit of a game is a bit, at best sort of loyalty points.
Right.
We want, kind of people to, it's a simple thing. 1,000 steps equals 1 sweat point. No matter where, no matter how, no matter when, no matter what incline, if you're running or if you're walking, it's always the same. But coming back to your question, yes, I think that I would not be against kind of doing something. Let me give you an example. We already mentioned buses, and there are a lot of people, especially in Zone 1 in London, that would take a tube journey covering one stop. Now, we know that the time to go in and go down into the train, wait for it, and then emerge on the other side is actually longer than if you would walk. Now, I feel that it would be totally amazing to point it out to people and actually make them feel you get there faster, you earn your Sweatcoins. What's not to like? Because quite a lot of people do it automatically because this is not a consideration that emerged in their life before. We have a tool and a mechanism that is perfectly positioned to start doing these things. In addition, that will also sort out the congestion that TfL is experiencing, in rush hour. It's incredible how many people cannot get on the train. So, there are so many positive things that we can bring to society and to individuals by really kind of thinking about those slots in the day, particular occasions, and how this can enhance the kind of life of everybody. It's not to say that kind of we in some nasty way will kind of extract something from people. As far as I'm concerned, making people more physically active and them expending energy is a good thing, no matter what sort of time of the day.
That's a very interesting point, because it's going to take me on to another topic, which is your growth. And I haven't, and correct me if I'm wrong, I haven't seen you advertise on the tube.
No,
which would be quite interesting, because when somebody's pressed against the door looking up and thinking like, oh crap, I could have just walked and earned some Sweatcoin, might be quite nice, but that's not the way you've gone.
We've spent zero on marketing,
which is
my past experience is marketing, and I think that it's for a lot of products that I've seen, it's a trap. I think the most important thing that you can do as a business, as a startup, is really perfect your product. Because if you put all the money, or bulk of your money, into the product, you will really be genuinely solving the problem of your customers, and then they will be the engine of growth for you. They will be doing your marketing for you. Yes, you can do a bit of nudging here and there, but kind of when people splash in early days of their existence money on marketing, I always look at it right now, and I am qualified to say, because I've done shitloads of marketing, is that you really need to be starting to do that when you really, really, really know hand on heart that you have an amazing product market fit, and it's just about igniting the fire. If you constantly need to spend money on marketing to kind of get those users, then perhaps you need to be thinking about your viral loop, your product value, the kind of how you communicate the value to people, how you incentivize them to potentially talk about you. There are lots of things that you can do in the product that will take care of your growth and your marketing.
Would you suggest that paying for users creates, so let's say a Bloom user versus a Sweatcoin user, do you think it creates a flakier cohort of users, in your opinion?
Flakier? No, I think that what I would say is, if you invest money into the product, this is like having a perpetual marketing. While if you're spending money on marketing, you acquire that user, that money is spent, the money is gone. So if I have a chocolate, for example, and I'm really busy perfecting that formula that makes people go and they rave about it, that's going to work with every new customer, and every new customer will make that sound, and there will be another new customer. Now, if I invested that money into marketing to make one person just make a sound, and somebody else heard them and they tasted it and it didn't really kind of make them do that, that's it. The chain reaction stopped. So products are able to create chain reaction. Marketing might accelerate it, but marketing cannot create chain reactions. I'm willing to be persuaded otherwise. So if somebody's got sort of experiences and examples that do, but fundamentally it's product that creates gravity, or that pulls people in, that really keeps them in. Marketing is just a communicator of it, and kind of potentially throws the net wider.
10 million users in 3 months, 4 months, whatever it is, says that you're not wrong.
Are you still,
at least from your own perspective.
I was going to say, are you still on that user J curve, or where did it start to get quite steep? And was that just the compound percentage growth? E.g., you get 20% per month, and now you have 20 million or 10 million users, so an extra 2 million joins. Or was there a particular turning point where you saw a notable uptick?
No, there are, as ever, I've never seen anything that is really, really gradual. Unless it's a huge business and you're already operating mass market and everything is, kind of tiny little swings and changes. So in our case, it was December, January, especially January. January is a perfect time for kind of our message, for people pay attention after Christmas and New Year's binges to kind of what they eat, how they move. This is the time when people go and get their gym memberships, just to be abandoned by the end of January, early February. And kind of our product perfectly fits into the mindset in that time of the year. Plus, we have a really, really cool viral loop. So if somebody is interested in kind of thinking how to grow, go and download our app and check how easy or kind of what calls to action we use to make sure that you, after installing our app, feel kind of compelled to share and to talk about it with your friends and family. So this is basically what started happening. That kind of our viral loop went into overdrive. Also, few really, really influential people on social media picked it up because, unlike probably some other products that kind of people share, we feel that we're not taking your social capital away. Sometimes people send me, you should try this product, and that product gives you financial reward if somebody joins. Okay, it's fair enough, but typically you need to go through a few hoops, and it almost feels like you're doing a favor to someone when this happens. In our case, it's completely different because people kind of go, "Wow, this is almost magical. I'm converting my steps into value." I know a couple of people that would benefit from it, and typically it's kind of friends, family, and somebody who they feel they need to be more physically active, and you feel that this is a relevant product that you're recommending that the person will not receive as like, and they're probably paying him. But this is kind of a genuine recommendation. So it works in both ways. And yes, we do reward every successful invite with 5 Sweatcoins. So kind of it works for everybody.
That was something I thought about, and your opinions on cryptocurrency welcome here. It sounds actually like you want to become a currency that is usable everywhere, but do you see within cryptocurrencies that they will operate within sort of self-sustaining ecosystems? And by this I mean there is Bitcoin, but do you think there will be redeemable coins, let's say, where if I am into sustainability, I can accrue some value that then is usable against purchasing sustainable coins because it's subsidized by government or redeemable? And with Sweatcoin, does it want to be a coin that can be used for almost everything, or do you see it existing within a sort of a more health, fitness slant, or do you think it could be used ubiquitously? And is that the...
This is a hard question. Blue sky thinking compels me to kind of engage. However, kind of my focus and my pragmatism tells me that there is a huge amount of work, use cases that need to be tackled in relation to physical activity and just, kind of our bodies. And, if we can become a default currency of economy of movement and everyone moves, I'd be very happy. Where it will go beyond that, I can't say. I have a feeling that by default, this can go into the area of carbon footprint, because when you move, rather than kind of taking a car or taking a bus, you do reduce your carbon footprint. But these are already kind of edge cases that might materialize and might become important. But at this stage, it's all about making people more physically active, because, as I mentioned, there are 3 issues in the world that destroy the most value. It's cigarettes, wars, and obesity, or lack of movement.
And in terms of, I guess they've got a couple of segues. I wanted to find out, because you're a blue sky thinker and you've got a potentially very exciting proposition. Are there any other areas of technology that you look at now with a bit of envy that really excite you? Let's say it's Elon Musk talking about trips to Mars, or electric vehicles. Like, is there any parts that you go, oh, those are exciting?
I think because I have kids, I'm really interested in education and patterns of education, and figuring out how to find out very quickly how to teach people, different sort of skills and knowledge, because everyone is extremely different and requires very different approach. And we still have kind of schools with classes, and everyone goes through same paces, and there's an exam, and there's this kind of gateways and A levels, O levels, GCSEs, and I have a feeling that if we're building the world for the future, which is what we do, education and customization of education, and figuring out how to make kids excited, interested, engaged, and really passionate about kind of consuming and absorbing this knowledge. If I wasn't doing Sweatcoin, that would be something that I would be kind of spending time on. That's one. I think there are some sort of specific technologies that really kind of fascinate me. Self-driving cars, of course, and the implications of it, and kind of my commute is nearly 2 hours one way. So I'm really interested in kind of people and ideas, how to shorten that, how to hyperloop. How do you automate the whole thing? How do you remove strikes that, I live on Southern, that is an absolute nightmare.
The worst. Southern Rail is terrible.
So how can you automate the darn thing kind of out of the whole system of commute? Or how can you develop these vehicles that, kind of you wouldn't have to drive, so that I would be able to jump in, and even if it is 2 hours, I actually productively spend them on something, as opposed to kind of jump from one train to another in Clapham Junction, and kind of in crowded tunnels. So that's another area. And I'm also I wish I had better education. I'm kind of right now with the advent of blockchain and zero knowledge proofs. I'm kind of just thinking, Jesus, if I could go back and really properly study math and kind of cryptography, this is something that I would definitely be spending a lot of time on, because it's fascinating implications, the zero knowledge proofs and exchange of evidence that something is there without actually sharing what it is, and kind of lots of use cases that it can power. So yeah,
so could you just highlight?
I can rant about that for forever.
Just a quick sentence on what a zero knowledge proof is to a layman, just. or is that not doable?
I inserted this probably more to because this is something that I've only started digging into. Zero knowledge proof is effectively technology that not technology. It's more of a math-based approach that allows you to, for example, confirm that you have enough money in your bank account for a certain transaction without revealing that, how much exactly you have in the bank account. And, it is fascinating because it sort of changes quite a lot of rules of engagement and enables a lot of use cases that I thought, were undreamable. And this is something that just hit me very, I've heard of them already a year ago, but it's only recently that I started really digging into it because, the implications are very, very profound. And, we're even toying, or I'm toying with the idea, is this something that we can potentially use in Sweatcoin?
And I think, Ollie, maybe you want to dig into some of the entrepreneurial health routines of Oleg.
Well, yeah, Ed mentioned that you've done lots of silent retreats.
Yeah.
Is that something that's informed your entrepreneurial life, or is that just a different compartment?
No, that was one of the things that I had to try in order to close the chapter of Bloom.
Right.
So, yeah, it was a coping mechanism because, as you can imagine, there is a lot of noise, grief, and kind of pressure. And silent retreats was my way of potentially distancing myself from all of this stuff without going into the mountains, which is the way I used to deal with this. Going to the mountains is 3 to 4 weeks kind of exercise. But kind of in my experience, it achieves very similar results to me. Well, it achieves a lot better result because you not just silence your mind, but you also become kind of fit as a fiddle and can run without breathing for a heck of a long time, because if you at altitude for a week or two, it's amazing what it does to your level of fitness. But it's also because you're very high, the oxygen is sparse, and your body is really, really good at shutting down everything unnecessary. So when you walk here on the street, for example, my mind would be kind of, do you remember that? And, I need to do this. And then you pull out the phone, and you send an email, you send a text message, or you make a call. There, you don't have any of those dialogues because, if you need to put foot forward, that's where kind of all the effort goes, and you take 3 breaths and you take a step, and there are no thoughts that cross your mind. And I found that kind of extremely helpful. So Vipassana is silent retreat is something that was getting me close to that. I've done 2 of those.
How long were they for?
10 days each. I would definitely recommend everyone to do one. I tried to do the second one probably 6 months or 7 months after the first one, and I realized that that's exactly opposite of what I should have done. They serve a purpose. They open you to kind of, they give you the result, but trying to do too much of anything is a bad thing. So until there is a real need, I probably will not be taking kind of Vipassana anytime soon.
But did you have previous meditation experience?
No.
And do you
sort of. I meditated enough to think that I will never be able to meditate.
Right. So you don't meditate now?
I do, but very irregularly. Thankfully, through Vipassana, I can actually meditate. And most importantly, if anyone is interested, kind of one of the biggest issues I had with meditation is I was thinking that you need to have silent mind when you meditate. And what Vipassana taught me is that no, the whole purpose of meditation is not to have a silent mind, but to actually allow all of these things to go through, be conscious, and just remove them, let them play out and disappear. Because until everything that is kind of that creates this cognitive dissonance in you plays out, it's very, very hard to be silent. So if you try to silence your mind, you effectively just suppress stuff. And maybe you can keep it for a period of time, but then it will still explode and it will take over. So now when I meditate, it's, I can do it pretty much anywhere and just kind of letting stuff out and through to make sure that it plays out and disappears and doesn't bother me again.
It's interesting. There's a book called The Master and the Emissary, and it says we expend now with our enlarged prefrontal cortex a lot of our energy suppressing thoughts and parts of our brain, and we actually it's a lot of our caloric energy consumption of our brain is spent stopping inappropriate animalistic behaviours, having that conflict, having that discussion, trying to find a logical output for what you're thinking. So I think even just allowing yourself to experience those, I find that my way of achieving that balance between not being bored by meditation and doing it is trying to do coordinated exercise. Maybe trying to teach myself handstands or something that involves the left-hand side of my body, and I can get wrapped up enough in that 40 minutes can go by and all I've been thinking about is that one thing, and that's quite cathartic. Might be a good time for Ollie to lead into the dose, I would say.
Yeah, so I don't think you had a chance to look at this before, but we like to get your wisdom, get the wisdom of our guests that we can pass on to the many entrepreneurs that we hope are listening. So do you have a startup related or entrepreneurship related book that you'd recommend?
What you particularly enjoyed reading of late?
To my absolute shame, and my co-founders will testify, I'm not 80-20 guy, unfortunately. I'm kind of 100-0. So I have been reading very little, very few books recently. And the reason for it is that I just find it difficult to, I know that I should, but if I go into something until I sort it out, that occupies my complete field of vision. And but probably the most kind of influential and important book that still influences me would be From Zero to One.
The Peter Thiel one.
Yeah, it's. I don't know, kind of when I read it, I still have a feeling that it probably, I'm not sure if it needs to be a book, because kind of it's the idea is kind of reasonably straightforward, but I think that it's very, very important to kind of to keep that in mind when you start building something, from very, very kind of early stage.
Yeah, it should just be a blog post.
So that's a Peter Thiel's face.
I find with a lot of those American self-help books, the premise is laid out very clearly and understandably in the preface, and then they have to write the rest of the book to satisfy the publishers.
I remember seeing him deliver a seminar for that. Actually, I went and sat, and Peter Thiel was up front. And that was quite nice because he was delivering the message of the book, so that got done in 5 minutes, as you say. And then actually people were asking him questions and bringing him to the front foot as how he basically how he thinks, because I think that's the premise of the book, is it's a very sort of Peter Thiel like viewpoint on the world. And I think he's a pretty interesting guy, whether you like him or not is up to personal preference. But seeing him in that live environment where he could be sort of knocked off his party line, where the book just takes you on a journey, questions got him to respond with his viewpoint. He's kind of reminds me a little bit of Sam Harris in terms of they're very analytical and specific in the way they behave. I don't necessarily think they're politically aligned.
But kind of I also took the bait of your question. I suppose I'll definitely come back to books, but I'll probably, when I finally kind of force myself to actually unplug at least for a few hours a day, I'll probably be reading fiction, because I find that in order to solve a problem, sometimes you really need to look in the opposite direction, and kind of reading something totally and entirely unrelated somehow in the past has given me kind of completely unexpected lateral kind of thoughts and ideas. I don't know, like bridging blockchain and loyalty scheme for sport that resulted in Sweatcoin. But what I do in terms of kind of helpful stuff as an entrepreneur is that I really focus on specific questions that I have. And there is so much stuff out there right now that, asking the right question and looking for the right blog post or looking for a specific name. So rather than reading a book, I find myself reading, kind of, if you want to be au fait with crypto and what's happening there, it's about white papers. I find myself scanning through quite a lot of them. If it is about solving a specific business problem, it is reading quite a lot of snippets of information that kind of various people would put as blog posts or even podcasts, and kind of triangulating them and trying to get sort of ideas out of it reasonably quickly. So, it's a very, very layman answer. I just basically experiment with search queries on Google, and I used to read a lot of stuff. Now I'm realizing that I know sufficient enough, I have sufficient enough experience to, on the first 3 or 4 sentences, to understand if the way this person delivers information is for me and I can engage with it, and then I give it a chance.
Right.
But if it's written in some form that that jars with me and makes me kind of uncomfortable, or kind of I don't necessarily follow, then I just discard it. So it's just a lot of sources that then I triangulate and sort of take an action. It's a fairly trivial thing, but gives pretty good, I would say, result in my experience.
You've got to know what you like.
We also have this founders network.
It's very useful.
So I, kind of in the past, I threw some of the questions into the network, but I've also discovered that some of the stuff that we do is also pretty, not to sound arrogant, but pretty cutting edge. And some of the problems that kind of we're solving, there are no tools, so kind of I read and I researched and I've spoken to people and I asked plenty of people around, and I realized that kind of nobody has found an answer. So we're building some of the answers ourselves.
It's quite an interesting thing about the human condition. There is maybe we are meant to operate in contrast and in sprints. So maybe your time of reflection was your time of reflection. You ingested experience. And then simply when you're building the company, all you need to focus on is expending that. And if you need to sort of get to a point where you need to readdress it again, then maybe you stop, focus on that, ingest more content, experience, whatever it might be, and then pull it back in and sprint again. Because you're right, sometimes I find myself reading a book and I'm utterly distracted. Also give a shout out to Dan Murray for Founders. He's curated that. And
yeah.
I guess one of the last things we were going to ask for, to wrap it up, is if there is anything anybody listening to this podcast can do to help you on your crusade, whether that be downloading the app, sharing the app, or something kind of more than that, what would be useful for anybody listening to this podcast to do to help you on your journey?
It is an interesting question. Definitely install the app. And given that our mission is to make the world more active, what I am really interested is kind of throw your ideas as to kind of what can we do to, in a very intelligent way, nudge people towards being more active through use of our app. If you have any ideas as to kind of what blockchain tech we should use, so one of the challenges that we encountered, we're already processing about 300 transactions per second at peak. That is 15 times the theoretical limit of Ethereum and 40 times the theoretical limit of Bitcoin. So, kind of just simply using existing proven blockchain solutions is not something that we can rely on. So if there is a kind of high throughput blockchain tech that works, give me a shout. I'd absolutely love to dig into it and spend some time understanding its applicability to us.
What's the best way for people to reach you?
Well, find me on Facebook. Yeah.
Sweatcoin on Twitter.
Yeah. Sweatcoin on Twitter.
Sweat Nation.
If you look, if you look on me, you'll find me. I'm not trying to hide.
And actually, to lobby and shame. Are there any countries that you found that will not get off their sofa to start earning Sweatcoin? They're being particularly resistant to downloading the app.
No, there are. I can tell you that we have dozens, and we now have hundreds of thousands of people that ask us when we come into their country. So it's actually our own decision. We're only in the UK, US, and Ireland right now. We haven't launched anywhere else for reasons of having to control our growth, because for a number of months our phones were ringing 24/7 because we had this issue, that issue,
I guess Android territories as well are probably more complicated than iOS heavy.
Yeah, we have both iOS and Android, but the issue that we had was, when you build a startup, you build it for 10 people, and kind of when we were building our backend, we said, well, theoretical limit was 100,000, and we're right now 10 million plus without fundamentally changing the architecture. So when you scale this fast, things break. And thankfully, we have an amazing team that was able to effectively rebuild the house while it was falling and on fire. But God, it wasn't fun. And those were the times when I was asking sort of people questions around, and most people say that these are good problems to have, but they're still problems.
Still kill your business.
Yeah.
Maybe you can create your own sort of AWS for hyperscale apps that be super low cost, quick and robust, and then maybe your own blockchain on the back of it. Who knows? If
you ever experience it, then just know that you have to go through it, because if you were building to scale, then you probably never see scale. So if it's a blessing to all of a sudden build something that scales fast. Just go through the pains and be ready for it. And really, it's exciting stuff to be doing. It's scary, and you think that you're going to be dead in the evening, and sometimes it's pure adrenaline, but it's because when you scale, people come out of woodwork, and kind of amazing advice will hit you when you really, really need it. But kind of fundamentally, we were also very, very lucky, because we have an amazing team. Igor Milov, who is our CTO, and I'll also name check Alex Gusev, who is our backend kind of developer, who almost single-handedly, carried this smoldering and kind of crumbling backend into the state that it is now, which is totally amazing.
Well, we're very excited to see where it goes.
One final prediction: how many users do you reckon you could get to within the next 18 months?
So now we're really kind of shifting goalposts for us. So it's about daily active walking users. So what matters to us are the people that kind of every day clock some Sweatcoins, some steps. And kind of right now we're at about 3.5 million. So I think that we should minimum treble. I'm hoping to get to about 15 million by the end of the year.
Amazing. Well, thank you so much for coming on. It's been absolutely fascinating, and we will catch up with you when you're into the trillions of steps, which will no doubt be beyond the solar system as we know it. Thank you very much for coming on, Oleg.
Thank you, guys.
Cheers,
really appreciate it.
Bye.